Is it Derry? Is it Londonderry? We're going to talk about that and so much more in today's podcast. Will your vacation take you through the north of Ireland? My Ulster Overview itinerary takes you through the highlights of Ulster, including the Giant's Causeway, Belfast, and Derry, while introducing you to places along the Causeway coast that you've not heard of. This itinerary is suitable for all ages and includes 3 levels of lodging recommendations. View this and my other free itineraries at irelandfamilyvacations.com/plan. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me again here on the Traveling in Ireland podcast. Today we are heading up to the north of Ireland, and my guest is Gleann Doherty, who is the owner of Derry Guided Tours. Gleann, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
No problem, Jody. Thank you.
So we're just going to kind of jump right into Derry because it's a little difficult to not bring politics into a discussion about Derry, because even the name of the city can be kind of contentious depending on who you're talking to. So, let's start there. Is it Derry? Is it Londonderry? Why does it have 2 names?
It has 3.
What's the third?
The original name, the original Irish name, the proper term is Dura, which is Doire, which translates to the Oak Grove. That was anglicised to obviously then to Derry. Anywhere in Ireland, the name you come across has been anglicised at some stage, and that takes Derry as well. So that's where that Derry term comes from, the original. But the other one there is Londonderry. Now that was changed in 1613. It was changed by James I. Now he got a group known as the London Guilds to finance, amongst other things, finance the building of the city walls. I always say when the monarch then asks you a question, you haven't got the option of a no, so it's a pleasant demand, right? And he got a group known as the London Guilds then to finance the building of the city walls. What they put on then was about £11,500. Not sure what that translates into dollars, but that it was £11,500.
That's going to be a lot of money today.
And that was back in 1613. So because they were sort of forced to put it on, James I recognised that, and he put London on the front of Derry, which in most parts of the north, if you use Londonderry, generally means you come from a Unionist or Protestant background. And obviously, if you use Derry, then you'd be more than likely to come from a nationalist or Catholic background. But generally in Derry, the vast majority of people refer to it as Derry. So a lot of people take great offence outside of Derry, not necessarily in. But you do get all the names there. It just depends how people were brought up, what they were brought up with, and you just sort of accept it. You don't. Well, I don't argue because that's what people are brought up with, and that's the name that people use. But I'd say the first preference for most Derry people is Derry.
Excellent. Very good to know. So you did bring up the city walls, and Derry is one of the only cities in Ireland to actually retain its complete city walls. I can only think of one other village down toward the south of Ireland that has a very complete border wall. So that wall was put there for a purpose, and it has a really great history. Can you share just a little bit about that without giving away your entire tour, which I know is fabulous?
That's the difficult part. Well, as I said, they date back to 1613 originally. They were built there for a purpose. The period that became known as the Plantation of Ulster. I'm not sure if people are aware of this, but it's a recolonization of the province of Ulster, a colonization of the province of Ulster, is essentially what they were built for. The plantation, slightly different American term, but it's a repopulation. Essentially, the province of Ulster all 9 counties of it was the last part of Ireland to come under English rule, as it would have been then. And once they get in here in the early 1600s, they cleared the lands of native Irish and replanted. That's where that term comes from, or repopulated the area with English and Scottish Protestants. Quite a lot of Americans are of Scots-Irish heritage, and this is a sort of era that they're coming in. The Scots-Irish sort of come into being, and the walls were designed in as being the main defensive structure for the plantation itself. So all the wee towns and villages outside of the walls would have been on their own unless there was a rebellion, or until there was a rebellion. And then the English and the Scots were allowed inside all the villages. So they sort of took protection from the native Irish rebellions, and that's sort of keeping the detail out of it.
And those walls, when you think of a wall, you don't necessarily think of what you experience there in Derry, because you could literally drive cars around these walls. They are massive.
They are. I think is it 30 meters across?
It's something like
at the
that.
widest part, I think. And around that, I wouldn't quote me on that, but it's in around there anyway. I'm nearly sure there was sort of vintage cars on there at one stage as a sort of vintage car show, because there is a section there at Bishop Street where you can actually come off and drive on. You're not generally supposed to do that, but I think they had like a vintage car show where the cars are sort of placed along a certain section. They do have a motorcycle club. They raise funds every year. They have like a tea party. That's how they describe it, But they would go around the city walls on motorbikes, and it's a yearly event that raises money for certain causes and the likes as well, So they're huge. I mean, quite a lot of people see the wall. When you're trying to describe the people, this walled city tour will take you on the city walls. You're not doing a balancing act. It's not a trapeze. They are quite wide in most of the parts. It's only a few feet in some of the sections, but as you well know, you've been there yourself. It's quite safe. I had a family there last year, and it was a bit windy, and they emailed me to say that they were thinking about not coming in case they get blew off the wall.
Oh.
So you can see where people's imaginations, that you're on this wall and you're sort of balancing yourself as you walk around. But I've never lost anybody. I'll put it that way, Not that I'm the wall, anyway,
And they're beautiful to see. They're beautiful to experience, and to have that just that experience of walking around a city. It's almost like you're walking around atop a city. It's really terrific.
Above the city, that's the way it feels,
Now, another thing that Derry is really well known for are its murals, and those are located, for the most part, in an area called the Bogside. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Can you tell us a little bit about why? I mean, why are there murals there? What brought this on, and kind of what will people see when they are in that area, the Bogside?
Well, the murals, as in sort of well-designed paintings, sort of come in the late 70s, get into the 1980s. That's when they really start. They would have been fairly fluid, so they would have been there for maybe a month or two. Then, depending on the political landscape, would have changed again to something else. And it was and is a form of protest. When people hadn't got a voice, especially the sort of Catholic nationalist community, then this was the only way of maybe getting their message or point across. The ones that you see today they were painted from 1994 right up through to sort of mid 2000s. But these ones were actually designed to be near enough static, sort of stay, and they were designed to actually explain the modern history of Derry, essentially moving or going between the civil rights period of the mid 1960s right up to the Good Friday Agreement or the peace process, and also take everything else in between. The murals use actual photographs. So these will make them, if you've been to Belfast, you see that, I mean, they're fantastic murals up there on both sides. But these murals are slightly different because it's not the artist's impression, so it's not the artist's mind as such, and the murals are taken from actual photographs that were taken during or in the events that they're trying to cover. So that's what makes the Derry murals quite a lot more significant, and it gets its point across better, put it that way, because it's not the artist's imagination, it's actually photographs that people recognize. So it sort of takes the argument out of what happened, if you know that type of way. Somebody didn't think the image up and put it on. There you are. There's the photograph. That's what happened. Or there's the 4 photographs, because so they cover that period, sort of taking in civil rights, security force murders during a conflict, the Battle of the Bogside, Bloody Sunday, right up through to the actual what they call the peace wall, or the peace mural, which is sort of multicolored wall with a sort of dove and everything in the center. So it takes you right from the 1960s. It takes in the American connections to certain murals, like, well, I don't call it a mural, Free Derry Corner, Free Derry Wall, but that has got, I don't know if I explained this to you when I was talking the last time, it has an American angle, it has an American beginnings. So when a lot of people were looking at the civil rights movement, they were looking obviously at the African American civil rights movement and taking a lot of sort of ideas and ideals from there. So we were actually taking some slogans as well, making them more Irish. Obviously, there are different parts in the United States. So there is, even with Free Derry Corner, there is an American angle on it, you know. I don't want to go into too much detail of it, you know. But that's what they sort of explain. They take you right up through the history. The modern history is where the walls would deal with quite a lot of the older history. It does take you up to the 20th century, but in detail, then that's where the sort of murals taken, and it goes from the 60s to the 2000s, you know.
And it's really an incredible experience to walk through that area, and especially to do so with a guide as knowledgeable as you are, because I know, Gleann, that you have an incredible background. You've studied history and things like that. So can you talk a little bit about why you put these tours together and a few of the tours that you offer? Because I know from experience that they are really, really great. And we did them when our children were younger, and you know, they really enjoyed the walls. They liked the pictures on the buildings, but they didn't really absorb a lot of what was going on beyond that. But your tours are really great, whether it's all adults or if you have a family along. So can you talk a little bit about your tours that you offer?
I did study Irish history and politics at the University of Ulster, what they call McGee here, which is in Derry. I was made redundant at the age of 38. Doing shift work, and that was sort of, I was getting too old for it, put it that way, or I thought I was getting too old for it. So I decided, with all the nagging between my mother and my mother-in-law, that you should go back and get an education, you know. So I left school when I was 15, with nothing whatsoever, you know, apart from the doors that I took off the school when I ran out, you know. But I went back and studied Irish history and politics at the age of 39. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mostly enjoyed every minute of it, apart from the examination process at the end, you know, because I'd never sat an exam before. And this was the big one that I had to sort of, so I hadn't got the experience of being an 18-year-old, as they would do it here in Ireland. You would sit your exams, the main ones, when you're 18. I was long gone out of school at that stage. So this is my first sort of experience of sitting really meaningful examinations, you know. But I enjoyed the whole process. The idea of me going back to school, the idea was to become a teacher, actually, and then hopefully teach history or politics. But at that stage, there wasn't enough retiring, and there was a backlog of 21-year-old teachers trying to get in. I wasn't a 21-year-old teacher. I was possibly a 42-year-old, I think. So time was against me in that degree. So I actually met a guy who was teaching, Michael Cooper, who was teaching a guide teaching a guiding course. I literally bumped into him in the street on the Bogside, and he invited me along to take the course as well. So that's how I actually became a guide. And then Michael actually landed me. My very first tour was a tour of the city walls. So I had actually studied. I studied it all, but I had more detail when I was doing the course. It was more modern history that was covering just sort of for that course. And then my first guided tour was the walls. And Michael actually told me a wee white lie. He said there's only 4 or 5. There was actually about 30 that were there. He done it on purpose, you know. He was expecting only 4, and then 30 showed up for the actual. So it was totally unpracticed. I hadn't got any sort of, apart from my actual degree. And I had loads of ammunition going around. I had quite a lot left over that I didn't actually use, so it actually went okay. So I decided then to put a sort of a walk. I know you can walk sort of both ways around the city walls, but I've just sort of done it on my own and walked around and seeing what you're looking at, and then putting the history of the buildings and the certain areas and overlooking the Bogside. So I actually put that wall city tour. It's probably similar to some, but I put it to my own and brought sort of a bit of my own story and a bit of the history that you don't really hear sometimes, you know. And then the Bloody Sunday and the Bogside murals one. Some of the guys just sort of randomly go around, or maybe start at the end and work their way through to the beginning. Where I start at Derry Corner, and the murals basically go in chronological order. So I went round and tried to get wee bits and pieces, just wee bits that were different, that you generally hear all the time, like Derry Corner, where the slogan came from and how it was a sort of adapted to the Irish civil rights movement. So just to get wee different bits and pieces about it. So I just put that tour together to myself. And then, of course, when it comes to Bloody Sunday, that's when I have that unfortunate connection of having it. My father, who was one of the people murdered on the day, he was actually the 12th out of 13. So unfortunately, I have that inside knowledge, which I say unfortunate, but I'm happy enough to share with people, because as you well know, my tours are pretty. Most of them are small, which I do prefer. I do have one on Sunday, which is 30 16-year-olds, so I'm 35 16-year-olds. So I'm really looking forward. It's a different type of tour when you do, like, I had school children. So here, primary 6, primary 7 would be 10 and 11-year-olds. And because Bloody Sunday's 50th anniversary was coming up a couple of weeks back, that's essentially what they were looking at, the civil rights. And it was, I'm going to say it was a nightmare, but I don't mean a nightmare in a bad way, because you have to, because if I'm talking to you on an adult level, then you expect that you're going to understand the terms that I'm using. Children, you have to take it right back and strip it right back to the very sort of bones of what was going on. And then the questions that they fire at you are, I have to say, incredible. And it really keeps you on your toes, really out of the blue questions. And then I'd done that for about 4 weeks ago maybe. One of them actually told me that they were related to one of the people murdering Bloody Sunday. And actually 2 of them told me, 2 different people. So when children are there, I find that they do listen. Sometimes you don't realize, because they're kicking stones over here, or they're pulling each other's hair, or they're doing something that children usually do. But quite a lot of the time, when you hear feedback from the schools, especially if they're traveling, say, from Kildare or whatever, teenagers, the teachers can hear what they're talking about, and they can hear the discussions. So quite a lot of them don't seem to listen, or sort of give you a blank stare, as teenagers are really good at, you know. But quite often they say it's amazing the conversations that they're having, even without the teachers. They're sitting at the back. The children are on their own, and they're actually they're discussing what they've heard and what they've seen, because the school book, as we all know, school books are fairly dry. Doesn't matter what the subject is. You're 15, it's a piece of paper that you have to read, right? Doesn't matter what the subject is. Once they come into the Derry and into the Bogside, Quite a lot of them start on the walls, get a wee brief history of the background, and then the modern stuff. And that's where the teachers get a massive benefit from, because they're out of the book and they're in the history. They're literally in the history. You're standing on the streets where history took place. And it's where, and when you say history, there's people passing you and they were involved in the Battle of the Bogside. When you're doing a tour, you can see people coming towards you and you're going, this guy or this girl was involved in the Battle of the Bogside or there in Bloody Sunday. So it's history, but it's not history to Derry people, you know.
Right, right. And I think that's one of the things I think that made your tours stick with us so much is the fact that you're not just guiding a tour, that A, you're passionate about it, and B, I mean, this is where you live, this is where you grew up, this is where your history is, and your history and Derry's history are one, really. And it brings just such a personal experience to the tours that I think just really makes them stand out.
No, thank you. But I've never scripted a tour. I've never sat down and had this script and this is what I've. So as you well know, what I think when I met you before, one of the first things I tell you, if you have any questions as we go around here, it's your tour, it's not mine. And that's what I do say to people. It's your tour. You tell me what you want to hear. If I'm not telling you what you want to hear, then ask the question, because obviously you can't cover every bit of history or every bit of Irish or Derry history. And that's why I do and emphasize as we go around. Even sometimes with my accent, I always say to people, if you don't understand what I'm saying, please stop me and tell me. Because you probably will know this is my slow version that we're speaking with. And you've been to Ireland a few times, you know. But that's one of the first things I do say to them when I do get them on the tour. There is a certain amount of, I hate to say the word script. I've never had a script. I've never done one up. But there is obviously a certain amount of things that you're going to hear and you're going to see that's going to be fairly similar. But that's what I always say then, because people come from all parts of the world. I had a guy here from California and he was able to tell me a story connected with the civil rights movement here, connected with the civil rights movement in the United States. And that's me learning as well. So that's me getting a slightly free education when you're talking to people. So I'm always encouraging, and I keep saying when I go around, if you've any questions, I'm not a dictator. You see, that's I'm used to being dictated to. I've been married 27 years, so I'm used to being dictated to, you know, and being asked certain questions. So that's what I think they always go through there. That is, I'm not on a script. I'm quite happy to drift away in any certain direction, just depending on where people's questions sort of take you to, you know, and hopefully answer the questions properly, you know.
So where can people learn more about Derry Guided Tours? How can they book them? And are there any certain social media accounts that they can get a little inspiration from that you have?
I'm on them all, unfortunately. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's basically Derry Guided Tours or Tours, depending. I think Twitter's Tour, singular. Or you can go to the website, which is www.derryguidedtours.com. Again, emails. I'm quite happy to explain the tours, the different ones that I sort of do, you know, and I go into a wee bit of detail, and then I ask people what they're coming for, what the reason they're coming for. And I think, was it yourself done a story a few years ago? It was about this girl is coming from Texas, or I believe, or is it, and her relatives, or both of her, two of her ancestors, two brothers, were involved in the siege of Derry. Was it Houston?
I think it was. I know it's on the site somewhere, and I'll be sure to link that.
Their second name was Houston, which is Scottish, which is Scots Presbyterian. So they essentially done a full circle. But they had told me before they had come, the reasons why they were coming back. Obviously, Houston, Scots Irish heritage. But they told me a few things about the relatives, and I was able to sort of take them to places where their two ancestors had stood, or in that sort of general area, because I knew two battles they were involved in during the siege, which were just outside the city walls, and there's a prominent marker there So I knew essentially where they would have been at that time in 1689.
And
It's
that,
hard to believe,
that just makes things even more, I mean, talk about taking something and making it personal. I love that.
I can't do it with everybody, unfortunately, because as you well know, Irish records are not great past the 1860s or something like that, or the 1900s. So Irish records are not brilliant. They're awful. Not because of our bad record keepers, but they were actually destroyed in 1921, 1920, 21. Either by the English or by the Irish, one of the two. There's two stories, but all the records were essentially destroyed pre sort of 1900, so anything back that way. And the Irish only really kept one set of records, and they were sent to the Central Records Office. As where if you've Presbyterian churches, they have two sets, one kept at the church and one kept at the Records Office. So when ours were destroyed, that was it. So it's always nice to get a wee sort of idea of why people are coming and what their connections are, so you can get that sort of personal. You can't always do it, unfortunately, but sometimes you get really good gems of knowledge,
And even if people know that they're coming to Derry and there are things that they really want to learn about, even letting you know that will help you to create a tour that's going to interest them and
Yeah.
and fit their goals.
Absolutely. The more knowledge and the more, as I say, I can't do it all the time, unfortunately, because of the records. I had a guy there 2 weeks ago. He's a Doherty or a Doherty as well from Canada. And he gave me this sort of list, and there's nothing. There's nothing because, as you well know, the O'Doherty clan come from this area. So every third person you meet is going to be a Doherty of some description, So unfortunately, I can't always do it, but I do try. And find out if I can. If I can't, I just let them know. But if I can, I let them know, but I don't give them too much detail of what you find out until they actually sort of get
Right.
here,
Excellent. So if people are planning to come to Derry, they're booking in a tour with you, um, there's so much else to do in and around Derry. And can you give like just three tips for things people maybe shouldn't miss while they're in the area? You'll need a car to reach some of these recommended destinations, so I'm excited to partner with irishcarrentals.com to provide an unbeatable quote on your car rental in Ireland. Be sure to use code IFV for Ireland Family Vacations in the promotions box to save an extra 10%. Now, here come those recommended destinations.
I can give four. The first one is be prepared. As you well know, Irish weather is unpredictable. I'm sitting here and it's blowing a gale outside, but the sun's shining, and every 10 minutes goes really black and rains for 10 minutes, and then it's bright blue skies again, One of the things that quite a lot of people don't go to see, and they really should, is the famine village in the Isle of Doe in Inishowen.
That's
and
amazing.
it gives you, because quite a lot of Irish Americans get their roots from the 1845, the 1853 Great Hunger, and it gives you a good insight into the circumstances of people leaving Ireland, how they lived, sometimes how they died, unfortunately. But it's guided the whole way through, and the guide gives you a huge description of what life was like before, during, and after what they call now the Great Hunger. So that's the Isle of Doe famine village. It's fantastic, I have to say.
It is. It is.
One of the tips I always give, and I think you got on to me the last time, there's two. Inishowen is, I can see it from my back window, the Inishowen Hills. You well know that the scenery up there, I can't pick one place for Inishowen. I can't pick one place at all, because you drive a complete circuit. You will tick on the Isle of Doe famine village as you drive around it as well, which is a plus. But the scenery for scenic wise, the Inishowen, it's the Inishowen 100. It's the biggest peninsula in Ireland, and Inishowen, it's the island of Owen. That's where it comes from. Um, the third part, and I gave this the last time because I holiday. I mean, I have Inishowen on my doorstep, but I will drive for an hour in the opposite direction to go to West Donegal. West Donegal for everything from Irish traditional music to the best Guinness in Donegal, which I've sampled once or twice, you know. But even the Gaeltacht areas, the Irish-speaking areas, they're all in West Donegal. One of the big, I think you've been here before, is the Slieve League. Slieve League cliffs. Quite a lot of people when they come to Ireland, obviously you have this circuit and you do all the Kerry, Cork, and Cliffs of Moher. The Slieve League is 3 times higher than the Cliffs of Moher. They do now have a car park, by the way, up there, which we hadn't got. That's what we refer to as
commercial. I still recommend walking from the lower car park to the top if you can. It's a hike. It's a hike.
It is a hike.
Gosh, it's so worth it.
It's worth doing. Some people go up there in coaches. I've never done it, thankfully, but it is worth going to see. We were there again just over 2 years ago. So we had holiday in what they call Gweedore. So it's actually what they call a Gaeltacht, which is an Irish-speaking area. My children are fluent in Irish, so they can get us there and back and order all stuff as well, you know. But obviously, people speak English and they're quite happy to do that. But if you have any Irish at all, they do appreciate a few words or a couple of fuckles, as they would say as well. But West Donegal, which takes in sort of Gweedore, the Highlands, all around there, it's just fantastic scenery. In the summer, you will know you get the Irish traditional music. But scenery-wise, again, West Donegal. You've got the place called the Gleann National Park. Gleann National Park is absolutely stunning. We have a wee caravan down there, we mobile home, down in Crawley, which is about 20 minutes from Glenveigh, and then you have the mountain just behind it, which the name is escaping me at the minute. Slieve Snaghta is in Irish, which is snowy mountain, basically. Errigal. You've got Errigal. Quite a lot of people refer to it as Mount Errigal. If you say that in that area, they correct you. It's just Errigal. You don't put the mount on it, you know. It's the biggest mountain in Donegal, and you can walk up it as well. But just below the Errigal is the Poison Glen.
So stunning there.
Absolutely stunning. I would say people would pay thousands of pounds to fly somewhere in the world to see what you can see 45 minutes from my front door, and it's absolutely stunning. It's a glacial valley with a big lock down at the bottom end, and then you've also got the Guinness House just across. You can just about see it. They've cleared some of the trees, so that would be Arthur Guinness, the guy who made the black stuff. They have a holiday home just over there. I haven't really seen anybody there in a long time, but you can see it across the loch. You can actually drive down. There's an old church there as well, but the views from up above are you'll get them nowhere else in the world, I'll say, you know. But that's the sort of west. It is a general spot, I'll give you that much, but it is West Donegal is absolutely fantastic. Inishowen is on absolutely the same level for wildness. Donegal is the least touristy of almost all the counties in Ireland, because for many years it was quite difficult to get here roadways, Derry included. There was never really the infrastructure for tourism. There was everything else that you needed apart from the actual infrastructure. And now you're getting more tourists. You're getting some, but it's still really wild, and that's what I love about West Donegal. You know, the wildness of it.
Yes, completely. It's a place where I often tell people when I work with them that there's an invisible line between Dublin and Galway. And probably 90% of visitors go south of that. And if you go north of that, you're going to have a vacation that you never imagined. And if you get clear up into that northwestern corner, I can't even think of one time that we encountered Americans up there. And you know, I send people up there, so that's going to change. But still, it's an amazing experience, and it's an area that it still retains that wildness.
Absolutely, because
that wild Atlantic way kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you've still got the cottages, you still got thatched cottage, not everywhere, but you still got them, and you've got it's fairly. Some parts are remote. Some parts you can't get a a mobile signal or cell signal. Some parts you can't get a television signal, which is absolutely fantastic if that's what you're looking for. So that it's still fairly wild. There is a few Americans now. There's a few more these last few years pre-COVID. Now they're starting to get more back, but you're starting to get some. But it's not touristy. It's still wild. It hasn't got that tourist element. There's nothing wrong with tourists, by the way, but I'm just saying it hasn't got that sort of. Some other parts of Ireland are geared toward tourism. Donegal is for Donegal people, and tourism come as well. No, that type of way. So you're sort of treated as one. You're treated as a local basically when you sort of go in, and people haven't got that sort of big aura thing, and you're not sort of putting on this. You get what you get in Donegal, which is good, by the way, not a bad thing.
Exactly. Donegal's an amazing magical area, and I'm so glad that you mentioned it because it is definitely worth visiting.
Absolutely.
Gleann, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today, for sharing not only your tours but your recommendations for visiting up in that northwestern part of Ireland. It really is an area that is so worth visiting and taking your time in.
No, I mean, I haven't even mentioned Derry. The great Irish traditional music scene that is Waterloo Street, I mean, Derry has one of the best Irish traditional music scenes that there is in the Northwest, which includes Donegal. Quite a lot of ones I had up sort of before COVID were coming to Derry, and there's about 4 or 5 different pubs in the one area, as you probably know, Waterloo Street, and there's music 7 nights a week. And they've been in Ireland about a week traveling from Dublin. So on a rare occasion they can pass that sort of invisible line at Galway. And they get into Derry, and this is the first time they've heard Irish traditional music in Ireland. And they've come from Dublin up through, staying the night and getting to Derry at some stage. And quite a lot of people saying you were really looking forward to, but we haven't heard Irish traditional music. You get in Derry 7 nights a week. And as I say, they call it a session. Which does include alcohol sometimes, but the session is music rather than anything else, where musicians blindly come together quite often. Some of them might know each other but never played together, and they just seem to know all the different songs, and you'll get a sesh for about, that's the sesh I would call as a music session. Maybe 4 hours of Irish traditional music, nearly non-stop, drinks in between, but Derry has got that. It is getting very well known for its Irish traditional music scene as well. So it's got that cultural element within the city centre,
It's definitely a place to add to your itinerary, for sure.
Absolutely.
Gleann is always so helpful and so full of such terrific tips and information. Who's ready to go to Derry, right? So anyway, I want to just thank you as always for listening to this episode of the Traveling in Ireland podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a 5-star review at Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can't leave a review on your podcast app, leave a review on the Ireland Family Vacations Facebook page, or take a screenshot and tag me at Ireland Family Vacations on Instagram with a few kind words. If you have any questions, you can always email me, Jody, at IrelandFamilyVacations.com. Until next time, slán go fóill.